This is Introduction to Civil 3D, Chapter 4, Blocks and Attributes. In this video, we'll be discussing what blocks are, and then what are some of the advantages to using one in your drawings. We're going to set up a basic block and insert it into a drawing, and then later on in the class time, we're going to actually be adding an attributable block that we can use to collect data and use that in our design. So our learning objectives for this module will be to distinguish between a block and a block with attributes. You should be able to tell the difference between the two and what advantages each have. We're going to create blocks. We're going to create blocks with attributes. We're going to get to the point that we're going to extract data out of that, which you can do for AutoCAD drawings. And that's not just blocks, but there's a lot of information that is built into those that we can pull out of our design. And then what we're probably going to do at the end is kind of deal with the same kind of structure, but more in how you could use it like in a collaborative environment. And so you'll get some experience with that and be able to do that. So there's a lot of things that blocks are, and I just pulled this out of all the stuff that's kind of listed in the Autodesk stuff and as well as in the book and everything like that. And there's a couple highlights. First, they can be created from an external file or within the block command. So there's two different ways you can create these. Another one that can be brought in as multiple or single entities. If you're going to bring them in as multiple entities, you're actually going to take that block characteristic away by exploding it, and that brings it back to its regular entities. The downside is that's no longer a block, but you do have that geometry in your drawing. The nice thing about blocks is they're a bunch of things. They're basically a grouping of different entities that you put into one thing. And because of that, you can rotate them, scale them, and copy them as the group, as long as you haven't exploded the block back to its original entities. And then these two are kind of important. When you bring in a block, it's going to come in at the layer that you brought it in, and yet it has its own layers within it that also can be controlled. So you can use this kind of a base layer that you insert all your blocks in, and you can freeze them and turn them on and off. But then you also have individual layers that came in that you can also edit. So it's a little bit of a control thing, and that's what's driving that whole design is what's called a parent-child relationship, and we'll cover that in a little bit. So why do we want them? For one, they save time. You're not having to go over and normally if you're going to make something a block, it's because you're going to be reusing a lot, and you don't want to have to go individually select all the lines, use a copy command, move it where you want it. You want to have more control than that, and so the block allows you to do that. It allows you to have that repeatability, and when you're talking tons of projects and things like that, it's good to have those things you're using over and over again as repeatable blocks in your thing. They actually reduce computer storage, and I put this in parentheses, not really an issue. That used to be a big deal. Like data storage was the biggest limiting factor in the design. Now, you have a gig, you've got like a 100 gig flash drive, so not as important now, but back in the day it was. And so they do reduce computer storage area, which actually does minimize some of the processing, but not a huge deal, but that is one of the characteristics. You can scale, you can do proportions and all that from the original object. So you can take that block and you can scale it off of that stuff. And then the other thing that's nice is it's not referring to this from another file. So whenever you create a block, you're actually going to take that and put it in your new file, and it'll store with it. some of you kind of ran into a problem with images. And so you attached an image to your drawing, saved it, and then moved it to another folder, and it couldn't find the image because it lost that pathway, that connectability. In this, with blocks, the blocks come in with the into the file that you're saving. It stays with it and all that, and that's a real useful thing too. So once we create the block, what we're going to do is we need to figure out a way to insert it. And so there's a couple different ways that we can do this. We can come in and we can use the insert command, but you also have the ability to drag and drop these in from like the design center and all. We don't use the design center a lot in here. We will use tool palettes, but there's a lot of stuff that actually is stored in there or gives you access to it in the design center. And one of the cool little things that has too is the ability to look at another file and actually say, hey, there's 5 blocks in here, and let you grab one from there and differentiate between them. So that's a kind of cool little thing. We're normally going to use the insert command, which kind of follows the same set of rules for all the things you insert. It's going to ask you the name of the thing you want to insert. If the block's already in your file and you want to like insert a new one, it'll already be in a drop-down list. Otherwise, it might be in an external file, in which case you'll want to come in here and click Browse, go find it. And then once you do, it gives you 3 different ways to control it when you first bring it in. First, where do you want to put it? And you can actually use true coordinates, or you can just click with your mouse. The scale, so you can scale this. You could have it twice as long as it is high, that sort of thing. So you have that control. Normally, you're going to come in at a 1-to-1, but you actually can control that here. Or if you check that box, you can do it during the insertion process. And then the third thing is the rotation. And then the last thing you need to pay attention to is right here. If you bring in a block and you have this checked, when it comes in, it's going to explode it back to its original coordinates. I mean, original entities. And so it's no longer grouped together. The advantage is you can edit things in there. The disadvantage is that you lose that ability to keep it kind of all together. And so you don't necessarily want to do this when you first bring it in. You can also use the explode command to do the exact same thing later. And sometimes I would suggest that, make sure you got it where you want it and then explode it later. But you do have that option when you bring it in. And sometimes people don't realize they've checked that box, and then they bring something in and it's messed up. So just keep an eye out for that. So once you do that, you've got your parts in there. So what I've got are these 2 different shapes. And let's say I'm doing a landscape design or something like that. And so I've got a couple different sets of trees. And I want to bring those into my file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make both of these a block. Now, in this case, I'm going to be using this a lot. So I'm not just using it in one file, I'll be using it in a bunch. So what I'm going to use here is what's called the W block command. And what that basically does is it's going to take your thing, whatever you pick, it's going to block it, but it's going to write that block out to your drive. So it basically becomes a drawing file. As a matter of fact, it'll have a DWG file type. The advantage is, though, that it gives you a couple other control things that you can put in there. And so that's what we're going to do in AutoCAD right now. So once again, here's what we're going to do in our first exercise. First, we're going to download our first drawing. We're going to open it up, and we have a couple things that we've got to clean it up a little. I'm going to add a little hatching and stuff like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the W block command for these 2 different tree canopies. And I'm going to come in, save them as 2 separate drawings, and then I'm going to come in and open up a separate drawing that is a site plan, which will look real familiar when I open it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there and insert these blocks in and use them for my landscape design. So that's the plan. Now let's open up Civil 3D and see how you do it. So I've opened up the first exercise file, and I put these two shapes in here. One's just basically a circle, one is a circle, 2 or 3 circles that I trimmed out like so. And so now that I got that, what I can do is I can come over and I'm actually going to come in here. Let's just create a line, and I'm just going to make a little couple little cuts in here. See something there. Something small, something like that. And I'll just hit the trim command, hit enter, and then I want to get rid of all these, so get rid of all this. And then get rid of these little parts right here. And so I've got a pretty decent little kind of broken up shape. This will be for some sort of tree like so. And if I want to, I can come in and see what layer are these landscape. So I'm going to select them all, and I'll come over and find that landscape. Here it is. If I set that, it'll reset everything like that. All right, so now let me come in. I'm going to set that layer, and I'm going to go to hatching, and I think I said use houndstooth, which is somewhere down here. Once again, if you're not comfortable with hatching, look back over the video on this. Ooh, that's way too big. Let's make it like 6. That looks good. And I'll hit enter. And so now I have my first tree. And so let me go ahead. I'm going to use the block command. So if you look right now, it's a bunch of separate things. It's a hatch, it's a bunch of series of lines, things like that. So I'm going to go in and do the block command, but I want to write this out. So instead of the general block command, what I'm going to do is what's called the W block. And I'm actually going to type this in because I forget where the icon is. But I'm going to come in and go W block, just like so, and hit enter. And this is the process that you're going to go, even if you use the block command, it basically is going to follow the same thing. First, it's going to say, what do you want to make a block? And in this case, I'll keep it default to objects. The next thing I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to hold off on this for a second. The next thing I'm going to do is come over here to the objects, and I'm going to click this little icon right here, and then draw a window around all my objects, hit enter, and you can look right here. It'll tell you if you select it or not. In this case, I got 13 objects selected. Next thing I'm going to go is right here and find out where I want to save it. So let's go documents, 2020 fall, 250, week 4, and I'm going to save this. I'm going to call this week 04-01 tree 10, pretend. So hit save right here. Now all that did was store it. It still hasn't happened yet because I haven't hit this. Now this last thing, the reason why I held this off is this is really important. This is how it's going to come in. Now what I mean by that is whatever this origin is, when you click your mouse, that's where it's going to place your object based on that origin. This origin right now is 0, 0, 0, which sounds okay. The problem is, if you look down at my coordinates right now are right around 2,500 by 7,000, which means if it inserts by that 0, 0, 0, odds are I'm not going to see the block. It'll be off the screen because it's 7,000 one direction, 2,500 the other. And so what we want to do is you want to make sure your insertion point is at a logical place. So in this case, this is a tree, and I would want it to be basically based on the trunk. So let me come over. I'm going to go pick point. So I'll click the little green button here. And I'll just kind of hover right there. There's the center point. I'll click it. And see, look at that coordinate. This coordinate, once you make a W block, basically becomes the origin. It becomes a 0, 0, 0 for this part. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. It's going to ask this information because we're in Civil 3D, because this is an AutoCAD command. And what it's basically saying is, if I have a geolocation, do you want me to include it? And we don't need to worry about that right now, so I'll just hit, you can hit no, it doesn't make a difference. And now it's written that thing off. If you look, none of this has changed. It's all still separate items. But I now have a file with this name on it, and I'll show you that in a second. So let me do this again. In this case, let me offset. Let's go 10. Nope. Let's go 2. And 0.5. So all I'm doing is kind of, I want to kind of create a thing on the inside here. And then I'm going to fill it radius 0. Let's go here. Oh, no, they're too big. All right, so let's move this one down like so. I'm going to move this one over like so, and then I'll move this one over like so, and then I'll move this one and stretch that one up here, and I'm going to stretch this one over here. There we go. And now I can trim this out. And all I'm doing is just kind of breaking it up. This is just all that I'm really trying to do here. Fill it R0. There we go. All right, so now let me come in. I'm going to hatch this one. So we'll go with the same hatch here. And then I'm going to go here, but I want to make this one smaller, like 4. And I want to rotate it a little, something like that. All right, so here's my second tree. Now that I created that, we'll do that same step again. So it's W block, right here. And I want to use objects. I want to select my object, so I'm going to click that little icon first, draw a window around this one, keeping it separate. These are 2 different objects, so I want to have 2 different W blocks. Once I pick what I want, I'll hit enter, and then it'll ask me, do I want to convert, do I want to name it? And I'll say yes, and I'll put it in the exact same spot, except I'm going to call this one canopy. Save. And then the last step, do not forget, is to pick my base point. In this, I'm going to kind of pick what I figure that is going to be where the trunk is going to be. I'll pick right here. Hit OK. No. All right, everything is set here. So now let me show you how we're going to insert it. I'm going to open up another file here called 1B. And this should look familiar. We've kind of messed around with this. And so let's say this is my park and I want to put some trees here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go insert, and I'll hit the insert command. And this will come up over here. This is the new insert option. And so if I click this button right here, the little ellipsis, I can go find my object. So it's right here. Now, once I have it in here, I can come in and I can start placing it. So if I click right here, now we have this, but you'll notice it's changed. For one, it's all grouped together, and it only has this one insertion point. Now what's cool about that though is if I select it, I can move this thing around. I can select it and right click and select something like copy, and then just copy it up. You know, so if I want to put a lot of trees right here, I can just copy them like so. Hit escape to get out. So once again, if you want to pick one, you go insert. You can also use, they have a slightly different one. It's on the insert tab, and right here is insert, and if you click here, it'll ask you if you want to use one right here, or if you click on that, it'll open up the same thing, and then you can come find what you want. And so I'm going to pick tree canopy, so that's right here, and now I'll click it, and then I can just place one. Now what's cool is once you place one, you can act like any line or anything else. So I can now just use copy command and copy it just like that. Or if I wanted to put another one in there, I can just put it in like so. All right, so that is how you create a block and then how you bring that block in. Now that that's there, we have in our current drawing, if we click on this, we'll look and it has 3 different blocks. These actually came in with the template. And then we have these over here. So those are our different blocks. All right, so that's just one way that you can create a block and bring it into your file.